Hello friends, welcome to today's lecture on question banks. We'll do question banks from UWorld. So let's start. In this, there is a 57-year-old male complaining of fatigue and low energy. He also has intermittent back pain that responds to ibuprofen. And his family history is significant for father dying of a heart attack. The fecal occult blood test is negative. The laboratory test revealed that the hematocrit is low. MCV is normal, WBC is normal, platelets normal, sodium potassium normal, liver function test that is AST ALT normal, bilirubin normal, but the creatinine is also increased. Further, on electrophoresis we see that there is a high peak to gamma globulins, that is antibodies. So the most likely diagnosis will be plasma cell neoplasm. Plasma cells are the cells that secrete antibodies and therefore it will be plasma cell neoplasm. So this condition is case of multiple myeloma, which is a neoplastic B lymphocyte disorder which matures into plasma cells and synthesize abnormally large amounts of monoclonal immunoglobulin or immunoglobulin fragments like light chain. Monoclonal means that only one type of antibody is produced. The clinical manifestations of this disease include the impaired hematopoiesis, which leads to normochromic normocytic anemia and weakness. Then the next very much important is lytic bone lesions that affects mainly the vertebral column, and this causes the back pain and pathologic fractures. Next is hypercalcemia and AL amyloidosis, which contribute to renal dysfunction, and severe amyloidosis can also cause cardiac and cutaneous findings. And therefore in this patient we have studied that there was a family history of his father being suffering from a cardiac disease. Now the lab findings or the lab abnormalities in multiple myeloma include the erythrocyte Rowlake's formation. What is this Rowlake's formation? This is when the erythrocytes aggregate to each other and form this chain, a short chain of erythrocytes due to aggregation of erythrocytes to one another is what is Rowlake's, like this. They aggregate and form chain, and this is seen on peripheral blood smear, and also we can see Benz-Jones proteins in the urine. This is due to filtration of the light chains of the immunoglobulin in the urine. Then on electrophoresis we see that there is a excessive monoclonal immunoglobulin present in the serum, which is represented by M peak. M peak indicates a increase in one of the type of or monoclonal excessive immunoglobulin. And M peak is not specific only for multiple myeloma. It can be found in Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia and some lymphomas. In Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia, the M peak is mainly for IgM or is only for IgM, whereas in multiple myeloma the MPIC can be for different types of immunoglobulins like IgA, IgG, IgM, but specifically or particularly it is for IgG. In most cases of multiple myeloma, we see that the MPIC is for IgG. The other options were incorrect because the iron deficiency anemia caused hypochromic microcytic anemia, which was not the case here, whereas the vitamin B12 deficiency caused macrocytic anemia. Again, this was not the case here. And the chronic lymphocytic leukemia may cause normocytic normochromic anemia, but the immunoglobulin is depressed in the cases of chronic lymphocytic leukemia, not increased. So this was also inappropriate. And in aplastic anemia, there should be depression of all kinds of hematologic cells. Like there should be leukocytopenia and thrombocytopenia also, but the count was normal in this case, so this was also not appropriate. Then Hodgkin lymphoma is a B-cell malignancy which is diagnosed with Reed-Steinberg cells presence. So there was no such presence, and in this condition there is also not seen any kind of monoclonal gammopathy. Therefore this was also not the disease. And Also, the Hodgkin's lymphoma is associated with anemia of chronic disease, which was not such mentioned. Then the patients with hypothyroidism may also be anemic, but this is due to iron deficiency or due to pernicious anemia. And also there is no monoclonal gammopathy in this disease also, and hence this was not the answer. Now in this 18-year-old man is coming because of 3 months of lower extremity pain, and the pain is persistent and presents both day and night. He has no fever, chills or history of leg trauma. He has expansile lesion of the distal femur. Expansile means such lesions which has the capability to expand. And the surgical dissection was performed and the specimen is shown. So this specimen is showing the distal femur. So the question is that mutation in which of the following gene will actually cause the patient's presentation. So the answer will be RB1. Now this is the picture demonstrated in the case. Now here we can see epiphysis, that is the end of the bone. Then metaphysis, which is between the epiphysis and diaphysis. Diaphysis is this long part of the bone. Then bone marrow is in the center of the diaphysis, and the cortex is on the periphery of the diaphysis. And this is distal femur. And the tumor we can see over here, which is expanding, and therefore it is known as expansile tumor. So the patient's expansile tumor in the distal femur likely indicates that this is the case of osteosarcoma, and which is the most common primary bone tumor affecting children and young adults. And the most cases arise at the metaphysis of long bones, and it presents with progressive pain and swelling. This typically arises when there is a mutation in the mesenchymal stem cell genes. For example, RB1 tumor suppressor gene and TPF3 tumor suppressor genes. The tumor suppressor genes mainly suppress the tumor. They have the role to suppress the tumor. So if there will be any mutation that inhibit their role, then the tumor will not be suppressed and will proliferate more, leading to cancer. So therefore, in such tumor suppressor genes condition, there is always inactivating mutations. The mutations which inactivate the suppressing function of these genes. Whereas in cases of proto-oncogenes, for example here, there is always activating mutation. The proto-oncogenes are one that lead to the formation of the cancer, and an activating mutation that further activate this genes capacity to lead to cancer leads to such neoplastic disease as osteosarcoma. So coming back to the genes that lead to osteosarcomas, they are RB1 tumor suppressor gene and the TPF3 tumor suppressor gene. The RB1 tumor suppressor gene need to or encodes for RB, that is a protein that regulates cell cycle progression. Then the inactivating mutation to this gene promote the unchecked and unregulated cellular replication, and then it leads to many cancer formations like osteosarcoma, retinoblastoma, melanoma and soft tissue sarcomas. Next are the TP53 tumor suppressor gene that encodes for PF3, that is a protein that P53, sorry, that is a protein that also regulates for cell cycle progression, but in addition to it, it also maintains the genomic integrity by activating DNA repair following damage. If there is any germline mutation to this TF3, it leads to formation of several cancers. In short, they are associated with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Li-Fraumeni syndrome, and this increases the risk for multiple tumors like osteosarcoma, soft tissue sarcomas, breast cancer, brain tumors and adrenal carcinomas. Li-Fraumeni syndrome is an inherited condition that is characterized by an increased risk for certain types of cancer. Other options were incorrect because the BRAF or BRAF is responsible for hairy cell leukemia. Again, it is a proto-oncogene, therefore there should be an activating mutation of BRAF so that it can lead to hairy cell leukemia, that is a B cell neoplasm, which is mainly present in older patients with pancytopenia, splenomegaly, and systemic symptoms like fatigue, recurrent infections. And it also may present in many cases of malignant melanoma. Now, HER2. HER2 is an oncogene, again a proto-oncogene that encodes for epidermal growth factor receptor and an overexpressed in many forms of invasive breast cancer. So from her we can say that it is responsible for breast cancer. And the treatment of HER2 gene product can improve outcomes in these individuals. So if we give treatment against such gene, then the individual's breast cancer can be uh, treated somehow. Now, the activating mutations in the KRAS, that is KRAS proto-oncogene, lead to the colorectal cancers and non-small lung cancers. It encodes for a GTPase that relays growth factor and proliferation signals from outside the cell. And the germline mutation of the RET proto-oncogene cause multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2. This multiple endocrine neoplasia is a rare genetic disorder that affects the endocrine glands, and this type 2 is mainly associated with adrenal gland causing pheochromocytoma, thyroid gland causing medullary thyroid cancer, and the parathyroid gland causing parathyroid hyperplasia and or mucosal neuromas. There are two types of genes, as I told you earlier, that there are proto-oncogenes that promote the formation of the cancers and the tumor suppressor genes that suppress the formation of the cancers. Now, in the proto-oncogenes, there are RAS, MEK, and EGFR. The RAS is a GTP binding protein that is responsible for cholangiocarcinoma and pancreatic adenocarcinoma, whereas MEK is a transcription factor and is responsible for formation of Burkitt lymphoma. EGFR stands for epidermal growth factor receptor, and it is a receptor of tyrosine kinase, and it leads to formation of lung adenocarcinoma. In tumor suppressor genes are BRCA1/2, next APC slash beta catenin, and TPF3. So the BRCA1 or 2 is our DNA repair genes responsible for breast and ovarian cancer. APC or beta catenin is involved in WNT signaling pathway and can lead to colon, gastric and pancreatic cancer with familial adenomatous polyposis. Next, the TPF3 is a genomic stability provider gene, and it can be seen, the mutation in such genes can be seen in most cancers, and but most commonly and most important is Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Some other proto-oncogenes are HER2, responsible for breast cancer. It is also a receptor tyrosine kinase. Then ABL, responsible for chronic myelogenous leukemia. It is a non-receptor tyrosine kinase. And a BRAF, which is RAS signal transduction, responsible for hairy cell leukemia and melanoma. Next, some more tumor suppressor genes are RB, which are responsible for retinoblastoma and osteosarcoma. It is a G1/S transition inhibitor. Next is WT1, which is for Wilms tumor. It is responsible for urogenital differentiation, and VHL, that leads to renal cell carcinoma and von Hippel-Lindau syndrome. It is an ubiquitin ligase component. Please do remember this table because this table can solve many of the oncology related problems or questions. Now in this case is a 2-week-old girl presenting to primary care provider, and the patient was born by normal vaginal delivery at 39 weeks gestation. The mother is breastfeeding exclusively, and the infant has regained her birth weight. Newborn screening results from hemoglobin electrophoresis are as follows. The HbF is 70%, the HbA is 20%, the HbS is 10%. The patient's mother has sickle cell triad and maternal cousin has sickle cell anemia. So the examination reveals that there is no pallor, it is a well appearing infant, and there is no splenomegaly. Which of the following is most likely true about this patient? Since we can see there is presence of HbS, it indicates that this girl is also suffering from sickle cell triad as of her mother. And therefore, in conditions or in cases where the patients or the person suffer from sickle cell triad, we have seen that there is a relative protection of such patients from Plasmodium falciparum. So the answer will be D. So the patient's electrophoresis demonstrate that she is suffering from sickle cell triad. So in this condition, there is heterogeneous genes, like there will be a normal HbA with HbS. So this is when occur, it is said to be a sickle cell triad. And in this, there is typically great amount of fetal hemoglobin, followed by there is HbA with the smallest amount of HbS, as seen in this case. Now HbA continues to be higher than HbS throughout the lifetime as the patient HbF naturally declines. So as the patient grow up, the HbF starts to decline normally in any condition, and the HbA increases. Same is the case of sickle cell triad also. In this condition also the HbF declines, but the HbA increases and is always higher than HbS. Whereas if it would have been the sickle cell anemia disease, then the HbS would have been higher than HbA. And in sickle cell triad, since HbA is higher, it offers protection from sickle cell anemia, aplastic crisis, and splenic sequestration. And their patients are usually asymptomatic and with normal hemoglobin level, reticulocyte count, and red blood cell indices. However, they may develop some of the symptoms as hematuria, priapism, and increased incidence of urinary tract infections. And the splenic infarctions is also seen at cases of high altitude. Now, such people with sickle cell triad have relative protection from Plasmodium falciparum because there is increased sickling of parasitized sickle cell triad. Means the RBCs which are affected by malaria are sickled and are accelerated or increasingly removed by splenic monocyte macrophage system. Therefore, there is increased removal of the parasite by the spleen because of sickling, and therefore there is a relative protection from Plasmodium falciparum. Relative because these patients are not immune. They also need prophylaxis if they are in some malaria endemic areas. So they are relatively protected, not fully protected. The other options were incorrect because the life expectancy of such patients is normal and is no different than of general population. If it would have been homozygous sickle cell mutation, then the life expectancy would have been decreased. Then the choices B and C, the patients with sickle cell triad typically have normal RBC indices and reticulocyte counts, whereas in individuals with sickle cell anemia would have an elevated reticulocyte count, but there is always a maintenance of normal mean corpuscular volume. In choice E, there will be it is unlikely that the patients with sickle cell triad develops painful crisis as they have a predominance of normal hemoglobin or HbA over HbS, and the vaso-occlusive pain crisis that develop in patients with sickle cell anemia thought to occur when HbS polymerizes and causes the RBCs to assume a sickle shape, typically in response to triggers such as cold weather and dehydration. So, on a summary, the patients with sickle cell triad are asymptomatic, relatively protected from malaria, and they have normal hemoglobin, reticulocyte and red blood index values, and the life expectancy is also normal. Same is demonstrated in this slide, that there are no symptoms, more prevalent in African, Middle Eastern and Mediterranean countries, with African American and Hispanic individuals involved. No life expectancy change, normal HB, reticulocyte count, RBC and TISAs, and in hemoglobin electrophoresis there is both HB and HBS, with HBA greater than HBS. Now this slide demonstrates the hemoglobin electrophoresis patterns, where the normal is when the HbA is 99%, HbA is 0 and HbF is less than 1%. In sickle cell disease, the HbA is 0, HbA becomes 85 to 95 and the hemoglobin or HbF increases to 5 to 15%. In the sickle cell triad, there is 50 to 60% HbA, but 35 to 45% HbS with less than 2% of HbF. Now in this case there is a 61-year-old man who has a complaint of 4 months of easy fatigability, anorexia and unintentional weight loss. Then his stool test is positive. Stool occult blood test is positive and shows macrocytic hypochromic anemia. On colonoscopy, there is a mass in the descending colon and the biopsy reveals that it is a adenocarcinoma. On subsequent CT scan of the abdomen, there is multiple metastatic liver lesions, and there is therapy with monoclonal antibodies that bind to epidermal growth factor receptors on the malignant cells is considered. An activating mutation of which of the following will most likely make this therapy ineffective? So there's a therapy going on where the monoclonal antibodies are binding to EGFR on the malignant cells. So what another mutation, that to active mutation. Please note this, that an active mutation will cause this therapy to be ineffective. Now the activating mutations of only proto-oncogenes will cause such thing. An activating mutation in tumor suppressor genes will never lead to formation of cancers. Now here the APC is a tumor suppressor gene, so this will not be the answer. Then the CRAS protein is a proto-oncogene, so then an activating mutation can lead to formation of cancer. Now P53 protein is also a tumor suppressor, the gene, as the P53 protein is encoded by TP53 tumor suppressor gene. So it is also not the answer. Now next, the platelet growth factor and the vascular endothelial growth factors are also proto-oncogenes, but they are the genes that are responsible for vascular or angiogenesis, that is vascular formation. So they are also not the answer. So the answer will be the CRAS protein, that whose activating mutation can lead to formation of adenocarcinomas of the colon. Now this slide presents to you the same explanation in more elaborated form. So the EGFR is stimulated in a paracrine or autocrine fashion by its ligand, leading to downstream activation of CRAS, a membrane-bound GTP binding protein that stimulates cellular growth and proliferation. Now many cancers like colorectal, pancreas can be lead to due to the derived unchecked cellular growth by expressing EGFR and its ligands, or by developing constitutive activating mutations in the CRAS proto-onco gene. This EGFR signaling system can be targeted for cancer treatment through monoclonal antibodies like cetuximab and panitumumab that block EGFR, leading to reduced CRAS stimulation and decreased cellular growth. However, this treatment is only effective for tumors with wild type or the normal type CRAS. Tumors with CRAS activating mutations are resistant to anti-EGFR agents, as they have constitutive activation of downstream signal that is independent of EGR stimulation or blockade. Therefore, prior to the use of anti-EGFR agents, there should be a genetic testing for the tumor tissue, so that to see if CRAS is a wild type, that is normal and is eligible for treatment, or mutated, which is non-eligible for treatment. The other options are incorrect, as I told that Adimatous polyposis coli is a tumor suppressor protein and it helps to degrade beta-catenin, preventing uncontrolled cell growth. If there will be inherited inactivating gene mutation to such, then it will lead to familial adenomatous polyposis. But there was the case for activating mutation, so this is not the answer. Next, again the the P53 is also a tumor suppressor gene, and it is involved in DNA repair, apoptosis, and cell cycle control. Mutations or deletions are present in large percentage of human tumors. So P53 is actually involved in many human tumors. Now next, the platelet derived growth factor, as I told you, it stimulates the formation of new blood vessels and proliferation of fibroblast and smooth muscle cells by binding to a receptor tyrosine kinase. And mutations will result in overexpression of encourage tumor growth by promoting uncontrolled angiogenesis. Next, the vascular endothelial growth factor is also a proto-oncogene responsible for angiogenesis and lymph vessel development, and overexpression will lead to tumor vascularization, facilitating the growth and metastasis of cancers. So, in summary, the activating mutations of CRAS gene lead to activation of the EGFR pathway, promoting increased cell proliferation and growth, and the tumors harbors this mutation are resistant to treatment with anti-EGFR drugs. Tumors that harbors these mutations are resistant to anti-EGFR drugs, that is cetuximab and panitumumab. Now, this slide demonstrates the CRAS mutation causing anti-EGFR resistance. Now, these are the EGFR inhibitors which inactivate the EGFR. If it will be normal type or wild type of CRAS, then it will limit the cell proliferation and growth. But if it will be the mutated one, some mutation if would have been occur in CRAS, then it will lead to uncontrolled cell proliferation. That is, it will become resistant to anti-EGFR therapy. Now, in this case, a 41-year-old healthy woman, previously was healthy, comes to the office due to weakness and easy fatigability. She has several episodes of epistaxis and gum bleeding. Her examination reveals that she has mucosal pallor, and further evaluation demonstrates that the patient has clonal proliferation of white blood cells containing an abnormal protein. In an experiment, the abnormal cells from the patient are purified and cultured in two different plates, one with a vitamin A derivative and other with control. After several days of incubation, cells in plate 1 are well differentiated compared to those in plate 2 whose clonal proliferation is inhibited. This patient most likely has which of the following conditions? Now, since in this question there is WBC's proliferation, so it will be myeloid leukemias and not the lymphocytic, because if they would have been lymphocytic, then only the lymphocytes would have proliferated. And also, since now how to know that it is acute or chronic, since there is vitamin A caused well differentiation of this clonal WBCs. This is the case for acute myeloid leukemia. More specifically, this case presents acute promyelocytic leukemia, which is a type M3 of acute myeloid leukemia. According to the French, American, British classification system, it results from T1517 mutation, whereby the gene for retinoic acid receptor alpha is transferred from chromosome 17 to chromosome 15, where it fuses with the promyelocytic leukemia gene. So, the retinoic acid receptor alpha gene in chromosome 17 is transferred to chromosome 14, and where there is PML gene. Okay. All in all, this leads to the formation of a new gene which is called PML/RAR alpha. Normally, this RAR alpha plays a role in the proper differentiation of myeloid precursors, as the receptor interacts with retinoic acid to affect transcription of genes required for maturation. However, when there is mutation in this T1517 in APML in cases of acute promyelocytic leukemia, this causes transcription depression, and this produces an abnormal receptor that is unable to signal for the differentiation of myeloid precursors at physiologic doses of retinoic acid. And therefore, the treatment with all trans retinoic acid or ATRA, a vitamin A derivative, overcomes this, partly by inducing PML RAR alpha proteolysis, and this stimulates the differentiation of myeloblast into mature granulocytes. ATRA therapy induces remission in about 90% of patients with APL. APL is associated with disseminated intravascular coagulation. Now, the other options are inappropriate as in choice A. The acute lymphocytic leukemia predominantly affect children, and the blast cell and they are mostly blast cell positive for CD10 antigen, which suggests a good prognosis. There was no such mention, therefore it is inappropriate. In chronic lymphocytic leukemia, it is seen in elderly patients, and it is present with lymphadenopathy, hepatosplenomegaly, and anemia, and has an indolent course. Neoplastic cells resemble mature B lymphocytes. There was no such mention, therefore it was not the appropriate answer. In chronic myeloid leukemia, which mostly manifests in elderly patients with fatigue, leukocytosis, and splenomegaly, myeloid precursors in different stages of differentiations proliferate. And this disease is caused by T922 translocation that forms the BCR-ABL fusion gene, which encodes for an abnormal tyrosine kinase. It was also not the appropriate answer. Several high-grade non-Hodgkin lymphomas are associated with cytogenic abnormalities as T814, T28, and T822, which are typical for Burkitt lymphoma. And this translocation involves the c-Myc oncogene. Now, this is also associated with Epstein-Barr virus infection and classically has a starry sky histologic appearance. Since there is no such mention, it is not the appropriate answer. This is all for today. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please do subscribe and share.